and I'd like to introduce today's Coffee Chat presenter, Amy Schaus. She is a doctor of acupuncture and integrative medicine. She specializes in metabolic health and weight loss. Amy has developed her own system called the Metabolic Health Method, which involves a 12-week personalized system that helps patients regain metabolic health, reverse high blood sugar, lose weight, and feel better in their bodies. Amy has been in direct patient care for 12 years, lives in Larkspur, California, with her son Lorenzo, her husband Enrico, and their cat Monkey. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Bob. So I am a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And I just kind of want to tell you a little bit about that for a second, because it is relevant to what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is I deal a lot with chronic pain, chronic and acute pain syndromes that patients come to see me for. And what I've noticed over the past 12 to 15 years of doing direct patient care with acupuncture and pain management was that many of my patients who were overweight, inflamed, or had metabolic issues like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, those things that all kind of tie together, diabetes, it's a lot harder to control pain in someone who has a metabolic dysfunction. So being the kind of person that I am, is I'm always questioning things and why, I realized that I had to get people's inflammation down, and a lot of people needed to lose some weight, get their blood sugar under control in order for their chronic pain to go away. So it just wasn't enough to put needles in people and expect a dramatic change after a couple of treatments. I started to have this conversation about inflammation and weight and blood sugar and all those metabolic things. So I just wanted to start sharing my screen for a minute, because I have a few slides. Also, let's see, can you see that?
Yep, we can see it, Amy.
All right. I always ask that. It's like a habit now. Can you see the slides? But so I also wanted to talk a little bit about myself, because this is me about 8 years ago. And I had struggled for many years with blood sugar issues and weight gain, and not only weight gain, but weight loss resistance. And I had gone up and down in my life, sort of varying between different body sizes and different health states. But it was after I had Lorenzo, my son, where I was really having a tough time. So you'll see that in this picture that I clearly look different. This is about 8 years ago. And I was at this point doing 3 to 5 spin classes a week, yoga twice a week, weight training, and I was watching what I was eating, and it was just nothing was really working. So being the kind of person that I am, I'm like, I got to figure this out. Something is not right, because I am eating less, I am moving more, and nothing is happening. So this is why I started twofold down this path of weight loss and metabolic syndrome, is because I was seeing the issues in my patients, I was seeing it in myself, and I realized there's something wrong here. We're not really getting the answers we need collectively as a society or as individuals with the information that's out there. So today I'm talking a little bit about myths around weight loss, myths and facts around weight loss. So first, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what is a myth. A myth is something that is a half-truth or an unquestioned belief. So a half-truth can be exactly what it is, where there's a sprinkling of truth, but it's not all quite there. It's not telling us the whole story. Or it's just a collective belief that we all kind of have culturally that we don't really question anymore. We just sort of believe it. That's how it is. Eat less, move more. That's how, count your calories. Those are a couple of the unquestioned beliefs or half-truths that I'm going to talk about today. And then, so also I just wanted to go to school for a second and talk a little bit about food before we dive into strategies and myths. So all food on the planet is either a protein, fat, or carbohydrate. Those are the three, we call them macronutrients. But if you think about it, all food contains usually two or more of these three ingredients. Of course, you have your vitamins and your nutrients, your vitamin C, that's different. Those are micronutrients. But what I'm going to focus on today is protein, fat, and carbohydrate. That's the only three that foods contain on the planet. So that's pretty simple. Another way to simplify this is to understand that fat and carbohydrates are sugar that can come from candy, it can come from fruit, it can come from a potato, or it can come from rice. Those are all sugar chains. We call those carbohydrate chains. So fat and carbohydrate are your energy sources. So with an energy source, you are either burning energy or you're storing energy. So it's either fat or carbohydrate, which is going to give you energy to burn or energy to store. Protein is different. Protein is not an energy source. A lot of people don't know this. Protein is actually a building block. It builds muscle and tissue. So you can think of this as, the foundation of your body, the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons, protein really, and collagen. Protein really is the structural piece. It does a lot of other things, but for the purposes of this talk, it's just going to be a building block. This is what builds muscle. So you eat protein and your muscles continue to build and be healthy, but it is not an energy source. So I wanted to ask, and I love doing this little game, but I wanted to ask if anyone can think of a food, and I know some people already know the answer to this because maybe they've seen my talk before, but if you can think of a food in nature that has both high amounts of sugar and fat. If anybody can think of a food in nature that has both high amounts of sugar and fat. And this is sort of surprisingly hard.
Avocado?
Everyone says avocado first, but avocado actually doesn't have any sugar in it. It has high fat.
I'm looking in the chat. Anybody else?
There are a couple foods in nature that are.
Here we go. Sweet potato or milk?
Milk is close. Very close.
And not sweet potato.
No, sweet potato is mostly carbohydrate. Not a lot of fat. Could be trace amounts, but I'm talking high sugar, high fat.
Mark put in avocado milkshake.
So it has to occur in nature. So the reason and I promise you there's a point to this. So nature doesn't necessarily create foods that have a lot of sugar and fat together because that's so energy dense. But one of the foods that it does create is an acorn. And the reason an acorn has high sugar and high fat is because this is a food that animals eat in the fall and they collect in the summer and the fall to use to fatten up so they can hibernate and sleep for 3 to 6 months out of the year. So an acorn is one of those foods, and it has a very, very specific purpose to bulk up an animal for hibernation. The other one is mother's milk. And the purpose of mother's milk, high sugar, high fat, is to grow a baby. We want to see our babies chunky, fat, and growing. And so that's why mother's milk contains such high amounts of sugar and fat. We don't really see outside of what we create in the kitchen much of these two energy sources that are put together. So what happens when you start getting into combining fat and carbohydrates? So I'm going to use some really quick ones. Donuts, lots of fat, lots of sugar. Pizza, lots of fat, lots of sugar. When I say sugar, I mean the crust and the carbohydrate. So we start seeing these sort of foods that are put together, man-made foods, I guess you could call them, and they equal a lot of fat and carbohydrate, and we call that, and we have, when you have a lot of fat and carbohydrate together, you start to call that energy toxicity, because anytime you have too much of something, it generally becomes a toxin. And so that's where you see people gaining weight, is when they're combining fat and sugar together, and we call it sugar fat. Anyway, and I have another question. If this is kind of a weird question, but I don't know if you guys have noticed, have you seen pictures of people before 1977, or maybe you've seen a documentary or a movie of people before the 70s? And have you noticed that most people were pretty lean before that time? Has anybody noticed that? I have.
Yeah, there's some yeses in the chat.
Yeah, I've definitely seen this. And so I kind of just wanted to briefly talk about what happened in 1977. So what happened in 1977 was we had the Senate decided to create a committee called the McGovern Committee. And it was the first time really in history that the government decided to put together dietary recommendations. So these dietary recommendations now came from the USDA, and they're called the dietary guidelines. And this is what happened when we decided we had this food pyramid, and we decided to eat, they were telling us to eat a lot of grains, eat low fat, eat a lot of, don't eat a lot of protein, don't eat a lot of red meat or meat specifically. But so the reason why this is relevant is because this changed everything. So if you ever seen that food pyramid with all the cereal and everything at the bottom, around this time too, the government was subsidizing grain. So our diet really, really switched around in the 70s. And this is actually when people started really gaining, and when the diabetes epidemic really started to ramp up. Hate to blame the government for much, but they did have a little bit of a hand in that. So one of the first myths I'm going to talk about, and this comes from the McGovern Committee, and these myths stem from this kind of system that we're now under after 1977. And the first slogan that I like to talk about is eat less, move more. And what I don't enjoy about this slogan, everybody's heard this slogan. Most people have heard it, and it's sort of part of our culture. But it really implies that all we need to do is eat less and move more. That's the end of the conversation. We know why we gain weight. We know what we need to do about it. Here you go, bam. And so a lot of people have done this. I've done this, where you exercise more and you eat less, and it may work for a period of time, but for most of us, we start to see stalls in our weight. We start to see stalls in our blood sugar management, because it really is just too simple. So it really implies that we know the cause of weight gain, which I'm here to tell you is that this slogan does not investigate the cause of weight gain. It is just the end of the conversation. It also emphasizes personal choice, which sounds funny because you think, okay, personal choice is all about or weight gain, and what you eat is all about personal choice. Of course it is, to a degree, but if we're only emphasizing that, and we're only emphasizing gluttony and sloth, then we're kind of getting this more judgmental piece that comes from it. So if you fail to eat less, move more, then you have a personal failure. This is when people start their character is being called into question, rather than strategizing around what we can do. It's just, here, do this, and if you can't get it done, then you have failed. The other myth that I like to talk about is the calories in, calories out myth. And I know a lot of people are more familiar with this term, and everybody talks about calories, but what calories do, the calories in, calories out kind of motto as the science to back up eat less, move more. This is like the science that's backing up the eat less, move more slogan, is that it says all calories are equal, and which is not true. Many of us know if you eat a bowl of ice cream, it's got a certain number of calories, but if versus eating a, you know, a high protein meal, which could be, you know, chicken with vegetables, you know, that those two types of food, foods are two sets of information that differ from each other. So not all calories are equal. I had a physician tell me once, well-meaning physician, I was overweight in my teens, and he just said, Amy, you know, you just got to watch your calories. You can either eat a big bowl of ice cream, or you can eat, you know, at the time it was like the serious low fat movement. So everybody was eating low fat, or you could have your pasta with, you know, barely any butter on it, or, and it'd be even better, margarine back then. Right. So, but I knew intuitively that that was not really the answer. This also prevents us from seeking the cause of weight gain, because it's just like this really nice, quick, easy algorithm. Too many calories, you're just going to gain weight. What it also doesn't address is what I like to address and talk about is hunger. Because you can count calories all day, but if you're hungry, you're eventually going to fail because you're hungry and your body is primal and it's sending you signals that you need to eat, and you cannot fight against the primal screaming of your hunger all day long or even part of the day. You're gonna give in. It's not gonna last. It's not a lasting strategy. This also does not account for hormones. So hormones are really important when it comes to weight loss resistance, and blood sugar management. Hormones are key. So these slogans really just do not address the root cause of weight gain, the root cause of inflammation and blood sugar management issues, where addressing hunger and addressing hormones are actually the key. So the fact is, food is information. It provides nutrients, it provides energy, and it stimulates hormones. It's a much more complex system than just eat less, move more, and calories in, calories out. So let's leave the calorie counting to the scientists, to the physicists, and let the rest of us figure a real way to get out of this situation. So the real reasons you're gaining or having weight loss resistance is, again, hunger and hormones. These are the two main issues here. So there's two types of hunger. There's what I call brittle hunger, and there's what I call true hunger. So if you cannot burn fat because your body is just it's just storing all the time, your hormones are telling your body to store fat all the time, to store the energy and not burn it, it's actually going to ask for more food and ask for more to be fed more, even though you have plenty of storage on your body, but certain hormones are going to prevent you from burning it. So with brittle hunger, it's like the Snickers bar commercial where the guy gets really hangry and he almost turns into Hulk. You know what I'm talking about? And then they give him a Snickers bar and he's like, oh my God, like a normal person. Like, I just ate a Snickers bar, so I feel normal. And I can function through my day now instead of wanting to kill somebody. So I don't know if anybody's ever been in that situation where you're just like, your hunger just feels like uncontrollable. Your blood sugar's out of control. Maybe you're shaky, nauseous, moody. You can't think straight. We really should not be in that position. Our ancestors went for hours and days and sometimes weeks without food. And when they hadn't been eating, they didn't fall over in the bush because they didn't get a Snickers bar. They were focused. They were clear-minded. They knew what they needed to do. The reason why we're in this brittle state of hunger is because we're always in fats, in the mode of fat storage, which has to do with the hormone insulin. So insulin is what your body produces when you eat carbohydrate and some protein, more with carbohydrate than protein. So if you've got continuous insulin pumping through your system, you've got continuous fat storage, and you're going to be continuously hungry. This is, again, the body's fat storing, it's not burning, so that it thinks it's hungry. It's almost like a mismatch. The body thinks it's hungry when it actually has plenty of food available as fat. So another reason for hunger is, aside from brittle hunger, which is more of a physical hunger that you're feeling because of these hormones, people have emotional hunger or stress eating. That is separate from actual physical brittle hunger. That is something that I like this quote by Dr. Robert Cywis: anything that is not a nutritional event is an emotional event. So if you're not eating, if you're eating for nutrients or energy, then that is a nutritional event. If you're eating outside of that, it's an emotional event. And sometimes these emotional events are good. Like we're at a birthday party or we're having dinner with our family. But sometimes it's like, I'm going to eat, a pint of ice cream every night because it's coronavirus and I'm feeling really stressed out right now. So it's important to understand the difference between stress eating and brittle hunger, because I will say right now, a lot of people focus on the stressful, the emotional eating piece before they address the brittle hunger, physical hunger first. And physical hunger will always win. You can do mindfulness and emotional work around eating and just think about, why am I stress eating right now, all day long. But if you still have brittle hunger, it's going to win. So you have to address brittle hunger first, or along with the emotional eating. So you have to kind of do both at the same time. And then I wanted to also say one more thing about hunger is that brittle hunger and emotional hunger are separate from true hunger. True hunger is gentle waves of hunger that come throughout the day. You're like, oh, I'm a little hungry. And then an hour passes and you're fine. Like you can wait till noon to have your lunch. You're not like gonna pass out. So those are the three types of hunger. Another myth is that eating fat makes you fat, which I showed before, that a more accurate statement is eating fat with sugar makes you fat. And you can say this too about eating sugar makes you, eating sugar makes you fat. Well, it's more likely of eating fat that eating fat with sugar makes you fat. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about protein. So protein makes you full, makes you feel full. Fat makes you feel full, makes you kind of gets rid of that hunger feeling. But carbohydrates do not. And there is a reason for that. So has anyone ever noticed when they're eating a steak, if you eat steak, sorry, vegetarians, if you're eating a steak or chicken or a protein source, and then next to that protein source is mashed potatoes, you eat your steak. Well, I'll just tell it from my perspective. I'm eating my steak. Oh gosh, I'm really full. I ate like 8 ounces of that steak. I can't eat anymore. But those potatoes look really good. Those mashed potatoes look really good on my plate. And then you take a bite of mashed potato and you're like, that's weird. I don't really feel like that like I'm, full anymore. And next thing you know, you've had 12 bites of mashed potatoes. Because the difference is between eating that steak and eating those potatoes is the steak is signaling with hormones, peptide YY, cholecystinin. Sorry for the science, but there are hormones that are saying you are full, you don't need any more of this building block, you're good. But with carbohydrates, you don't get that signaling. Because why? Because it ancestral reason why we crave more carbohydrate, and we can just keep eating the potato and keep eating the ice cream, right? You've eaten half the pint, you're like, oh, I'm done. And they're like, no, I'm not done. You bring it back and it's like your body is literally not signaling because it wants you to store. Because when carbohydrates were abundant normally during the times of our ancestors was very limited times of the year. So when we had them, we would kind of hoard them. The problem is now we're living in a situation where there is abundance of both carbohydrates, protein, and fat at all times. So again, I just wanted to talk a little bit. Number one fat storage hormone is insulin. It prevents fat from being taken out of storage. And the reason why I want to just emphasize this one more time is because hormones are meant to be pulsatile in the body. They're meant to come out and do their job and leave. They're not supposed to hang around all the time. And if you're eating at a high frequency, breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, then you're continuously pumping out insulin all day long at a high frequency. So your body is in constant storage mode, and it's never getting a chance to get out of storage mode and burn the fat that's on your body, or the sugar that's floating in your bloodstream, or the sugar that's being stored in your liver. So this really is a hormone problem. So a couple strategies I can just briefly talk about, and then I'll be done and we can do some Q&A, but is to reduce your carbohydrates and your sugar, which carbohydrates and sugar are the same thing. And you can just start with breakfast. So the later in the day that you have your carbs is better, because you're not going to set yourself up to start being hungry, because you get the rebound hunger with carbs. And then you're going longer periods of time with low insulin, because carbohydrates stimulate insulin. So if you fasted all night and you have a low carb breakfast, you're keeping insulin low all the way until lunch or dinner, when you decide to have a little carb. Fill up on protein. Try to eat a little more protein. Again, it's going to signal satiety. It's going to make you feel full, and it's going to help you control your brittle hunger. So you can start with breakfast. Again, this is a process, and you can start with breakfast. Just do a low carb, maybe a higher protein breakfast. The last thing I'll talk about is to decrease meal frequency, which is a fancy way to say stop eating so much, which is not like an eat less, move more kind of thing, but just I want people to start decreasing the frequency of their meals. And this gets kind of into fasting strategies, and I use a lot of fasting strategies in my clinic. I actually teach a fasting focused lifestyle, because I think it actually mimics how our ancestors lived and what our bodies are really built to do. So I had a patient ask me last week, do you want me to decrease my portion size? No, I do not want you to decrease your portion size. I want you to start with lowering insulin by decreasing carbohydrates at your earliest meal, and I don't want you to worry about portion size to start with. And so fasting, decreasing meal frequency is a strategy of fasting, and there's tons of different ways to do fasting. I usually on-ramp people into a really easy intermittent fast, but as you'll see from this list, there's tons of ways of fasting. I mean, there's intermittent, there's alternate day, there's something called eat, stop, eat, there's something called warrior, 1 meal a day. I do that one probably at least once a week. There's extended fasting, which you can do fast for 3 to 5 days. Fasting is kind of like training. You don't want to jump in and just do an extended fast. What I mean is it's like training for a marathon. You want to start slow, and you want to start with an intermittent, like a little bit of fasting, build it in, lower your insulin. Then you're not going to be as hungry. And then you're going to be like, wow, I feel great. And then you're going to be ready for more fasting. So I teach a lot of different strategies. It depends on where the person is at. So again, calorie restriction as primary, or calorie reduction as primary, is not what I think is a good strategy. There's a better way. It's to look at hormones and hunger, use fasting, and use the strategy of your meals, the timing of your meals as a lifestyle, and to get rid of this personal choice behavior. Eating too much, exercising too little creates obesity. Those are the myths. And I hope I've outlined some facts or some other ways to think of how we do this. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, we have time. And I also just wanted to say that I do offer 30-minute free consultations for anybody who's interested in having a deeper conversation around all of this information.